Okay, thank you for coming again. So, the Dragon Conference, this is the first one. It was Rachel's idea. Rachel's doing the tickets in the corner of the room. And it was just an idea. Originally, wouldn't it be great to have a Dragon Conference? And it does sound good, but originally I thought, well, can you talk about dragons for a whole day, really? And yes, of course it can. Dragons are phenomenal. They're in every culture of the world, and in different cultures they're benevolent and friendly, demonic and scary, but whatever culture, they're dynamic, powerful energies, and so it's a huge topic, really. And I'll introduce some of the ideas in this little talk, but before I do that, I'll explain the Glastonbury Dragons. Is there a buzz? I don't know how you'd fix that. Yeah. Where's the technician person? Yeah. Is that okay? Is it because of me on the microphone? Right.
No, it seemed to come on when the air conditioning went on. So that's another problem.
Is that okay? No? You try and figure that out. I'll try and figure this out. These clips on here are so stiff, you know, it's like, ow, it's like a mousetrap. Breathe in. Okay. Is that better? Is it still buzzing? Yes. Shall I just talk without a microphone? I've got a loud enough voice. Yeah.
The voice is slightly louder, the buzzing seems to come on when the air conditioning went off, but I don't know if that's a problem with you.
It could be the dragons breathing, couldn't it? Yeah. Is that better? Yeah? Okay. All right then. So, the Glastonbury Dragons aren't even a year old yet. They're a year old on the 1st of May. And we've already done 3 major events. We did Beltane last year, we did Samhain last year, and we also did the Carnival last year. And each time we've got better at what we do, and it takes a lot of work to do what we do. And now this is the first time we've put on a Dragon Conference as well. We chose to do the May Bank Holiday Sunday every year. This has led to some confusion because people think Beltane is the 1st of May. And there's different ways of looking at Beltane. But the reason we chose to stick with the Bank Holiday Sunday is simply so people can come to town and visit. Next year on the 1st of May, it's a Tuesday, it's not even a bank holiday. And with the Bank Holiday Sunday, for the past 35 years, Glastonbury's had a road run, which means road closure. So by sticking to the Bank Holiday Sunday, we can work with the road closure and make it an all-day event. So that was our original scheme. And then I thought, well, if you're doing it on the Sunday every year, what are you going to do on a Saturday? So the Dragon Conference manifested as something to do on the Saturday, and who knows what it will grow into. The dragons then, I'll show you them as we go along, but the idea for them comes from this thing. This is called the Michael line. I imagine most of you are familiar with it, but just in case some of you aren't, going across the country from St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall all the way to the Norfolk coast, there's this alignment of magnificent hilltops, and certainly in the lower end, the West Country end, many dedications to the Archangel Michael. So it got nicknamed the Michael line. However, those churches are 11th century, 12th century, and there's places on this line that are much older. You're talking about the stone circle called the Hurlers on Bodmin Moor, and most importantly, Avebury itself. is on this line, and Glastonbury Tor is on this line. So Glastonbury has this unique position, literally almost sharing with Avebury. Avebury and Glastonbury hold the central area of this line. Now, dowsers, this is from a book called The Sun and the Serpent. Dowsers douse energy lines going along the alignment that aren't straight. They wiggle and they cross over each other, a lot like the caduceus symbol. So I was aware of this back in the late 1990s, and for me, Glastonbury always had this twin serpent relationship to it because of the Michael line and the male and female energies that go along the line. The magical thing about this line, and it's objective. So much of Glastonbury's stuff is subjective, it's legendary. You know, Joseph of Arimathea bringing the Holy Grail, or the grave of King Arthur. These are legends, so they're subjective, that you can't prove them. But this is objective, it's real. You just get a map and draw a line and it's there. So there's nothing to debate about this, it's an objective reality, really. But what is it? Well, we still don't know what it is. But what it does is what's important. What it does is it points to sunrise at Beltane. So Glastonbury always had this alignment pointing to the Beltane sunrise and these twin dragons or twin serpents. So this landscape phenomena was the driving idea behind the red and white dragons that we've done with the Glastonbury Dragons. The patterns in the land go way beyond the Michael line, and it gets very complicated. There's patterns within patterns, if you like. But I'll just give you a glimpse of this thing. It's called the parallelogram. And my friend Alan Royce, just before lunchtime, will be mentioning this in his talk. Whereas the Michael line goes all the way across the country, this is kind of our local neck of the woods, if you like. And every part of this parallelogram, diamond shape, has dragon stuff in it. What you have is Glastonbury Tor here with a Michael church, and Borough Mump is a Michael church, and at Montacute you've got St Michael's Hill, and you've got a Michael church at North Cadbury, South Cadbury. So you've got 4 Michael churches. And of course, where there's Michael, where there's George, there's dragons. There's always a dragon with Michael. And it's equal-sided, so you've got 11 miles, 11 miles, 11 miles, 11 miles. And this line is another Michael line, because it's parallel to that line. So this line points at May Day sunrise too. But it's more magical than that, because this one line, it points to Beltane sunrise, and Lughnasadh sunrise, and to Imbolc and Samhain sunsets. So although we say it's a Beltane line, it actually does all 4 of the cross-quarter fire festivals in one single stroke. 2 sunrises, 2 sunsets. In the middle, just slightly off, the actual dead centre middle is a crossroad, and it's called Ashen Cross. And a mile or so away is St Michael's Church at Somerton. And St Michael's Church at Somerton is fantastic. The whole ceiling is carved with pairs of dragons. Amazing thing. Alan will show you a picture of that. This half of the triangle, the right-hand side, so from the Tor to Cadbury Castle to St Michael's at Montacute, was described in 1724. 1724 by William Stukely, and he said, almost word for word, I can't remember exactly, but he actually says, King Arthur had some saint or other rid the land of serpents. So he doesn't say the saint, he just says some saint or other rid the land of serpents. Well, it's Michael, 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 and Michael is a dragon slayer. You know, so this bit of folklore that William Stukely's reporting in 1724 corresponds with this landscape geometry. More locally, Glastonbury has the red spring and the white spring. So the dragons also represent that alchemy of the red and the white. And that's actually older there's actually older red and white law in Glastonbury before the Springs. In the Somerset Levels to the north of Glastonbury, you've got Hart Lake. And Hart Lake is formed by two rivers, and they're called the River White Lake and the River Red Lake. So these old rivers come together and they become the Hart Lake. It's quite interesting. Also, the dragons, the red and white dragons, are of course Merlin, and the story of Dinas Emrys and the dragons being found in the pool. They are, the red dragon is the Britons and the white dragon is the Saxons. It's that as well. And simplistically, it's just winter and summer. So for us, the red dragon represents the summertime. So at Beltane, there's a little bit of a race and the red dragon has to win. And at Samhain, the white dragon wins. So it's just a year clock, really, is the simplest way of looking at it. But the ideas behind it were the Michael line and the Beltane sunrise alignment. So, back in January last year, things have been going on in Glastonbury for a good 10 years or so with a maypole on May Day, and I bumped into my friend Max, who works here at the Assembly Rooms, and Max and his partner Lisa had organised a maypole thing for a few years, and I bumped into him in Morrison's in January last year, and I said, "What are you doing for May Day this year?" And he said, "We're not doing anything." And he and Lisa just felt like they'd done it for a few years and they wanted some time out, and understandable. And I said to them, "Do you mind if I try and do something?" And they said, "No, not at all, go for it." So I put a call out on Facebook and just asked people if anyone wants to get together and plan Beltane, let's meet up in the Georgian Pilgrim and share ideas. And so this happened right at the beginning. I did this very quick scribble with biro of a person inside the dragon head, and my whole motivation was the Michael line and the twin serpents. And my friend Steve, who's working here today as a sound projector, is a blacksmith and a silversmith, brilliant at making things. And so he said, "Yeah, I can make that." So that was it. Very quickly, it started growing. So these are made from old recycled tent poles from, I think they came from the Glastonbury Festival, actually. You know, people leave their tents behind and stuff, and they end up in the scrap store, and Steve salvaged what he could. They look a bit like Arabs with their forehead pieces. So this was, I don't know, this was probably like April last year, taking shape. That's Steve here. So he made the framework, which is solid. We want to make these things to last so they can be passed on, like the Padstow Obios, to generations. So they're being made tough. But we were running out of time, and we're still holding things together with gaffer tape and stuff, you know. And we literally finished them on the morning of May Day, and the paint was still wet when we went out with them on the high street. But it was a brilliant success. The amount of people that turned up last Beltane, we think was, one of the newspapers said 3,000 people. And that was just from, I don't know, 7 or 8 people meeting regularly at the Georgian Pilgrim and sharing ideas and talking about it on Facebook and stuff, you know. The dragons, the heads are 7 foot long, and there's just one person inside. It's quite heavy. The bodies are 50 foot long, and inside are people holding hula hoops and just playing Follow My Leader. No one can see where they're going. They rely on these banners. The dragon, just through the small porthole in the eye, can keep an eye on the banners and kind of go in that direction. And the drummers help, so the drummers are drumming along and kind of steering you away from bollards and stuff. You know, it's quite a chaotic thing, but we've got better at it, and the dragons have got better. Here's Steve, famously covered in paint, because, like I said, the paint was still wet. The white dragon was still wet, so this guy is likely to get wet, nudging up against him. And there's Lydia Light leading the dragon drummers. The drummers are in between the dragons, and the dragon heads are so heavy. You wear a rucksack, and it slots into a pole, and it does this to you, and there's a crossbar inside, so you hold that crossbar, and as soon as it slots in, you're like this. Oops. And you're like that for an hour and a half. And your legs, you're like, And the Glastonbury High Street goes uphill, and he's like, oh, no, you know. You can't do it without the drums. You need those drums, because marching band, that really helps. You know, there's a reason why armies have drums to get the soldiers marching, because with that rhythm, somehow you get there. It's a bit intimate, but the following day I could hardly walk. My bum cheeks had cramped, and I was like, oh, fucking hell, like this. No. It was huge. This photo's better when you can zoom in, but we can't do that at the moment. This is the top of the high street. The market cross is way back there, and it was packed. You couldn't move, you know. Phenomenal. The dragons look tiny amongst that sea of people, and that sea of people carries on back to the market cross, you know. So Beltane was a huge success. Here's most of the organisers. Where are we? There's me. There's Steve. Daniel is in charge of the Morris dancing. There's Francis, who's the producer for the theatre, you're going to see later on. This was the Summer King at the time. Steve's a theatrical person, Lisa a theatrical person, Rachel, who dreamt up the idea of the Dragon Conference, collecting tickets and so on. Dave Beach is doing all the live music. So back to that unity candle and unity, it really is a whole community coming together. So people have said to me, oh, you've done a great job, but it's not me. You know, all I've done is maybe share some ideas, and Steve made the dragons. All I do is paint them. I make them look pretty, you know, and carry the bloody thing, you know, but other than that. So here's the dragons after Beltane, and if you look carefully, you can see how badly they are. You can still see gaffer tape around their noses. They painted the gaffer tape gold, but you can see the ridges of it. And around the back, they're quite messy, but we did what we could, as best as we could. But I want to show you how they've improved. So this was Mark I dragons, if you like. So we had 6 months then till Samhain to improve their skin. And we did lots of experiments, and we had lots of cock-ups along the way. Tried doing silicon, rubbery silicon stuff, which was all right for texture, but the paint wouldn't stick on it, kept flaking off. So then we came up with an experiment of mixing liquid latex with acrylic paint. It's something Jim Henson does for the Muppets, and you actually end up with a rubberized paint, so you can make a rubberized skin. So all the fundraising we do goes into buying latex and paint and all that sort of stuff. So if you look at their bodies now, so they're wrinkled, they got the gaffer tape, and now the next photo shows you with their new skin texture. You know, so all the gaffer tape is concealed, and you've got this lovely kind of scaly barnacle kind of thing going on with their jowls. So that's how they looked at Samhain last year. But I still didn't have time to paint the eyes. They still look like a pewter portal in a ship or something, you know. So I was never happy with it. I was happy with the texture, but the texture also made them heavier, you know. But I was never happy with the paint job. So this is Mark III now. This is the dragons that's coming out tomorrow. Yeah. So they've been blinged, you know. So there's a kind of a gecko kind of scaly eye thing going on. I've actually changed the eyes as well a little bit more. So instead of the round portal, there's now a black slit, which is more like a snake or a lizard, and it looks more effective. So even this photo's out of date, but it's the most up-to-date one I've got. So gradually the dragons are improving and growing and getting more and more durable. So tough, you know, again, so we can pass it on to generations. So this is some of us. There's Dan Goodfellow, played Gwyn up Neath at Samhain. There's Steve, who made the dragons, and Francis, the theatre producer. This is called the Fairfield. It's the first field when you go to the tour from Wellhouse Lane, where Dion Fortune used to live, Geoffrey Ash's entrance. And at May Day, what's been arranged for the past 10 years or more, is that a maypole goes up the high street to Bushy Combe, and everyone does maypole dancing at Bushy Combe. But because the dragons came to represent winter and summer, and we intended doing Beltane and Samhain, loosely speaking, the first day of summer, the first day of winter, we needed something to do for Samhain, and you can't take a maypole up the high street at Samhain, so we had to think, well, what can we do at Samhain? So we shared ideas, and this is what we came up with. The legends of the tour are about a Celtic deity called Gwyn ap Neath, who's called King of the Fairies, but he's really a psychopomp to the spirit world. And Samhain is all about the veil being thin and the ancestors being very close by and all of that sort of idea. So we thought, can we do something up the high street that incorporates the Gwyn ap Neath legend? And so Steve came up with an idea of making a throne. Let's take Gwyn ap Neath back to the tour in a big Celtic throne. And then that grew, as ideas do, to it's like a great big sedan chair thing carried by 8 people, and this antlered god going up the high street. So that's what we planned. Alan Royce is in the corner. Alan's going to be talking before lunch, and he came up with this very ingenious, simple way of making a dog's head headdress out of one piece of cloth. Some brilliant ideas, you know. So Alan made 8 of these, so that the 8 people carrying Gwyn ap Neath on his throne are the 8 hounds of the other world, you know. So the Celtic hunter god is there with his hounds going back to the tour. And this is the whole thing. You can just see the dogs' heads. So Dan's way above ground level there. And made this throne, which I don't know if I got a better picture, but Dan really went into the whole role and played it brilliantly. And we wanted, when we were describing it, you remember the old Robin of Sherwood TV series, and you got Herne the Hunter with his antlers and arms outstretched, and we wanted that kind of feeling at the base of the tour. And Dan pulled it off amazingly. I'll show you some photos in a minute. It really was just like all you needed was Clannad playing in the background, you know. So this is the dragons appearing at Samhain, the drummers again, and this chap Terry, and I can't see the other standard bearer Nick is here as well, and they've come back to carry the banners again. They're really important again because the dragons can't really see where they're going. Samhain, we didn't know what to expect. Beltane has been established, like I say, for a good decade or so. And so when we had 3,000 people at Beltane, we didn't know what was us. Some people are there because of the road run. Some people are there because of the maypole anyway. And some people are there because the dragons were there. But Samhain was a test paper, if you like, because Samhain was just us. And it wasn't even a bank holiday. So we put it out on Facebook, we're going to do this. Get everyone to the foot of the tour at twilight, round a fire, and just hope people turn up. We had between 800 and 1,000 people turning up for this. So this is Samhain last winter. Again, packed all the way up to the high street. We learnt a lot of lessons because we planned theatre around the market cross, but people can't see or hear what's going on at the market cross. You know, so we've had to rearrange how we do things for tomorrow. We're not even going to do it at the market cross anymore because the market cross is too small. So because of the road run, we've got Magdalen Street, which is the street where the Abbey entrance is, and the high street closed until 4. And next to the town hall, there's a big house called St. Dunstan House, and it has a large, wide patio. And we're going to do everything on the patio with microphones so everyone can see and hear. And the audience can stand in the road because there's a road closure. So there's plenty of room for wheelchairs and all the rest of it, you know. So Samhain turned into something rather profound and special. And part of it was something I was pushing for, just my own personal baggage, really. In recent years, there's been in Glastonbury a trend at Halloween and Samhain to go very South American Day of the Dead, or kind of in a voodoo way, or just the Americanized Halloween zombies and ghouls and all that sort of stuff. It's just fine. I understand the theatre of all of that. But if you're talking about Samhain and ancestors, well, first of all, ancestors aren't ancient Neolithic people. Ancestors are your grandparents. They might even be your mum and dad. And I don't think of my grandparents as a skull with a top hat on. You know, my grandparents have sparkly eyes and they smile, you know. So we put it out there on Facebook that honouring the ancestors is everyone you love that is now on the other side. You know, they don't even need to be blood ancestors, just friends who have died. It's honouring those who have crossed over. So what we did at the Market Cross is we had these two priestesses, Lisa and Claudine. Claudine's my girlfriend. Sadly, she can't be here. She's in Jersey at the moment. But before the dragons took off to go up the high street, Claudine and Lisa collected pieces of paper from the audience, and we mentioned it beforehand on Facebook so people knew what to do, and people wrote down on pieces of paper loved ones' names that had died, you know, and these two gathered it all in a big kind of basket, and we went up the dragon procession to the fairfield, and they used those pieces of paper to start the fire. You know, so Beltane has this kind of life, celebration, jubilance, sexy energy to it, and Samhain has this continuation after death to the next world and calling forth those who are already crossed that river to kind of stand around the fire with the living and stuff, you know. That people kind of think of ancestors as behind you in the past, but actually they've crossed the river first. So when we die, and it's their footsteps we're following. So really the ancestors are ahead of us, they're not behind us. So those little pieces of prayer paper were used to light the fire. There's Lisa lighting the fire. It was a phenomenal evening. We timed it so that we're there in the daylight, and as we do our entertainments, twilight kicks in and the lanterns come on. And it was a phenomenal thing. And Dan Goodfellow did this spontaneous speech as Gwyn up Neath, saying this is the first time Gwyn's been honoured in 1,000 years and all this sort of stuff. And there was an uprising of energy. It was brilliant, really great fun. So here's Dan doing the Hunter thing. Not so much this photo, but the next two photos are spot on. So imagine being on the Tor, well, the field below the Tor and the tower of the Tor behind Dan, and all the lanterns and the fire and that, you know. It was brilliant, it really was. So, the Glastonbury Dragons as an organisation are for breathing new life into our town, really. That all of us live here. We need the town to be busy so that I can sell my artwork and Steve can sell his jewellery and all the rest of it. And last year the town was dying, all the banks shut down. There were more and more empty shops, and the shops that came to fill the empty shops are just more charity shops and stuff. And there was a dying energy. And so we really, our driving force, we don't want this, we want a vibrant town. You know, and everyone loves Glastonbury, and we want it to be special. So that's our driving force. And so at the moment we're doing Beltane and Samhain, and the Dragons will just do that. We thought about bringing them out other times, but we decided no, just twice a year. If you bring it out too often, the novelty wears off. So twice a year is enough. But we are encouraging and working to do other things like art exhibitions and theatre and stuff. And two of our little success stories is the Glastonbury Morris dancers started off with our dragon meetings, but Daniel, brilliantly here, kept it going all year round, and they're now their own totally independent Morris troupe that go off and do different fates in local villages and stuff. Here's the theatre group. So later, at the end of this afternoon, Shadow of the Tor, which is Francis and Brad, and they're thespians, will be putting on a show. I don't even know what they're doing. Other than that, it's a kind of history of Glastonbury over the centuries from, I think, Neolithic time up until modern day, and they're doing all this in 45 minutes. They're short sketches somehow, and it's all seen from a personified Tor. So the Tor is a person observing the centuries go by, and different periods of history and bits of dragon stuff throughout the centuries. And Francis, when I was asking him about it, he said some of the sketches are comedy, some are straight, and some are just very bizarre. So I'm looking forward to see what happens too. So this is this weekend's event. Like I say, the dragons aren't even a year old yet. They're a year old on Monday. And here we are in the Dragon Conference, first ever Dragon Conference. Pulled it together mainly from friends I know. So here I am. Alan is going to talk. Alan's an old friend of mine, kind of a mentor too. And I have two friends called Gary and Peter, who very kindly have had me do talks at some of their events. So we're kind of friends from different conferences. And asked them if they could come and talk about dragons. And they've got some fascinating things to say, because dragons are in every neck of the woods, really. And I'm going to give a glimpse of some of that. And when I was creating the conference, there was a space left. And I thought, I don't know who else to ask. I don't know what else to do. And I thought, well, we'll just have a questionnaire session, and all the speakers can sit on the stage and the audience can ask questions. And just as I was about to put that on the website, this stranger contacted me from Exeter, said, I'm a 14 times cryptozoologist, and I actually investigate modern day claims of dragon sightings. Would you be interested in me doing a talk? I said, well, absolutely, you know. So Richard Freeman is here this afternoon. I've never met him, only on Facebook, and he's written some books on dragon sightings. He sounds a really interesting guy. He goes off looking for abominable snowmen and yetis and strange creatures in Africa and stuff. And he is a professional cryptozoologist and stuff, lives in Exeter. So that would be interesting. And then, of course, the theatre bit and stuff. So my own little background is just in Glastonbury. I've been here 17 years nearly, and mainly working with landscape stuff. So the Michael line and its Beltane alignment, and then bigger patterns in the land. Ultimately looking at ideas about something called the Glastonbury Zodiac, which was discovered or invented by a lady called Catherine Maltwood in the, we used to say 1920s, but the evidence is that it's earlier. So, yeah, interesting. But that kind of perusal of crazy ideas about the landscape opens up a whole can of worms of all sorts of strange things going on. And I'm going to give you a little glimpse of how wide dragon lore is. So the Michael line was mentioned in books by John Michel, but this was the first ever book that just dedicated itself to the Michael line. Came out, I think, in the 80s. And the authors of this book followed the line from Cornwall to Norfolk, and they dowsed the male and female dragon serpent energy that was going along the lines. Prior to this, John Michel had talked about dragon lines as energy lines in China. China has a whole system of feng shui where they even will, if they have to, carve a hillside or a mountain to be the right shape for the energy, sort of thing. But they don't see it as controlling nature, they see it as harmonizing and working with the dragon energies. So for China, it's all about harmony with primordial forces rather than trying to control them. That's the basic idea of feng shui, that you're attracting energy, rivers, or sending them away if there's too much hectic activity or if there's a blockage and stuff. So energies of the land have always been personified as dragons, but dragons are more than land energies. They are massively in occult and pagan symbolism. Peter Knight will be talking about the origins of pagan symbolism and dragon lore and how it gets adopted by Christianity and stuff. So everything's old. The oldest depiction of a dragon goes back to ancient Mesopotamia. And it's the same sort of undulating dragon that you get in China, but predates China by thousands of years. This book is interesting because it's a story book written in 1936 by the late Dion Fortune, and it tells the story of a man in the 1920s who has past life memories of being a monk in the 12th century. And all these Michael churches are 12th century Michael churches. But in his past life memory as a monk, he was a heretical monk. And he found some old documents on the old god Pan and Arcadian, ancient Alexandrian mystery traditions and getting back to nature and all of that stuff. And when he got caught out in the 12th century, he got bricked up in the monastery wall. So the man in the 1920s is fixing this trauma from past life memories and stuff. So that's the story, but it kind of goes, it is Dion Fortune talking about medieval Christianity really being an echo of older traditions. It's very much like Peter Knight's talk is going to be about. But the special thing about this book is that in it, Dion Fortune talks about lines of power across the land. And she describes a triangle of power. And she calls it the Michael triangle. And what it is this. Glastonbury Tor and its Michael Church, St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall, and Mont Saint-Michel on the border of Normandy and Brittany and stuff. And Dion Fortune talks a lot about this triangle of Michael. Now, of course, one side is the Michael line. This side, really interesting, was followed up by the authors of The Sun and the Serpent, did another book called The Dance of the Dragon. And so that line from St. Michael's Mount to Mont Saint-Michel carries on through Europe. And it starts off being in Michael places and the Michael cult, which goes back to 740 AD or something in Italy. And then it becomes places in the ancient world to do with Apollo and so on. Interestingly, it carries on past St. Michael's Mount to Mount Skellig in Ireland, which is where Luke Skywalker is at the moment for the film coming out at Christmas. The film finished with Mount Skellig, with the Michael line, and the young female hero in the story is going to get all her Jedi training on the Mount Skellig Michael line that goes through Europe. In The Goatfoot God, Dion Fortune goes beyond this triangle. She also talks about power centres, and she has 4 power centres, which are roughly north, south, east and west. And then this. Lindisfarne is the northern power centre in her novel. St. Albans Head is the southern power centre. St. Albans, the town, is the east power centre. And Tintagel is the west. And where these cross is Avebury on the Michael line. And in The Goatfoot God, Dion Fortune in the 1930s saying all the major power sites go to Avebury, or the kind of Wiltshire levels. She talks about the chalk downs are holding the power in some way and stuff. So that's Dragons of the Earth dragons. This thing is called the Bianchini tablet. It's a Roman artifact. I think it was found in Gaul. Might be wrong about that. It was broken up and thrown down a well by some disapproving person, but it represents the night sky. And you've got the zodiac signs and what's called the decans, which are 36 sections around the zodiac. But in the middle, there's a serpent and 2 bears. Okay, it's like a early yin-yang symbol, if you like, but it's Roman, 3rd or 4th century. But that serpent in the centre is constant. All the other constellations go around the constellation of Draco. The Draco, the dragon, is the centre of the night sky, with the 2 bears roughly either side of it. So the Romans stylized it like that. It's not literally like that, it's more like this. But you've got the great bear, the little bear, and Draco there. The current pole star is Polaris. And going back thousands of years, because of precession, it was Thuban and Draco. So thousands of years ago, the serpent was at the center point of the stirring night sky. So the dragon was in the center of the heavens. That's why in Chinese star lore, you have the celestial dragon, represents the emperor, and the emperor is in the heart of China with everything around it. And the Romans did that in their battlefields. The cavalry unit had a dragon on a pole, representing the heavenly dragon at the top. And quite literally, wherever the Draconarius rode on his horse, the rest of the cavalry would follow, just like all the other constellations going around Draco in the night sky. So the dragon does represent that unity, pulling together, holding the center point, if you like. Alan will be talking again. It gets more complicated, and I'll let Alan deal with that for you. But Alan's famously scribbling on napkins and sharing ideas. Pickle your brain. But there is a relationship then between the pole axis and Draco. There's Ursa Major. But also a constellation called Hydra, which is Hydra is the water dragon, and a lot of the ley lines seem to be related to water springs and stuff. So there is a kind of esoteric, magical method of working with the heavenly dragon and the earthly water Hydra dragon, but that's also a process inside you as an individual. The pole axis that goes to the heavens is your spinal cord. Okay? So like Kundalini or tantric things, you have this sleeping dragon down below, and there's the idea of raising the dragon and lighting up the pineal gland. So these heavenly and earthly dragons work together as a yin-yang process within everybody. And it's not a belief system, it's just an old way of internal alchemy, if you like. So Alan will be talking about some of that, and some of it is very unusual. This is me wearing my fancy stuff, and the reason I'm wearing my fancy stuff is because no one sees me tomorrow. All you see is my feet, and my ego gets wounded to get all the wonderful photographs on Facebook, and all you ever see is my feet under a dragon, you know. So that's me, just my one chance to show off a little bit. And that's it. Thank you very much. So there's a Okay, thank you for coming again. So, the Dragon Conference, this is the first one. It was Rachel's idea. Rachel's doing the tickets in the corner of the room. And it was just an idea, originally, wouldn't it be great to have a Dragon Conference? And it does sound good, but originally I thought, well, can you talk about dragons for a whole day, really? And yes, of course it can. Dragons are phenomenal. They're in every culture of the world, and in different cultures they're benevolent and friendly, demonic and scary, but whatever culture, they're dynamic, powerful energies, and so it's a huge topic, really. And I'll introduce some of the ideas in this little talk, but before I do that, I'll explain the Glastonbury Dragons. Is there a buzz? I don't know how you'd fix that. Yeah. Where's the technician person? Yeah. Dowsers, this is from a book called The Sun and the Serpent. Dowsers douse energy lines going along the alignment that aren't straight. They wiggle and they cross over each other, a lot like the caduceus symbol. So I was aware of this back in the late 1990s, and for me, Glastonbury always had this twin serpent relationship to it because of the Michael line and the male and female energies that go along the line. The magical thing about this line and it's objective. So much of Glastonbury's stuff is subjective, it's legendary. You know, Joseph of Arimathea bringing the Holy Grail, or the grave of King Arthur. These are legends, so they're subjective, that you can't prove them. But this is objective, it's real. You just get a map and draw a line and it's there. So there's nothing to debate about this, it's an objective reality, really. But what is it? Well, we still don't know what it is. But what it does is what's important. What it does is it points to sunrise at Beltane. So Glastonbury always had this alignment pointing to the Beltane sunrise and these twin dragons or twin serpents. So this landscape phenomena was the driving idea. Is that okay? Is it because of me on the microphone?
No, it seemed to come on when the air conditioning went on. So that's another problem.
Is that okay? No? You try and figure that out, I'll try and figure this out. These clips on here are so stiff, you know, it's like, ow, it's like a mousetrap. Breathe in. Okay. Is that better? Is it still buzzing? Shall I just talk without a microphone? I've got a loud enough voice.
Your voice is slightly louder, the buzzing seems to have come on when the air conditioning went on. So I don't know if that's a problem with you.
It could be the dragons breathing, couldn't it? Yeah. Is that better? Yeah? Okay. All right then. The Dragon Conference manifested as something to do on the Saturday, and who knows what it will grow into. The dragons then, I'll show you them as we go along, but the idea for them comes from this thing. This is called the Michael line. I imagine most of you are familiar with it, but just in case some of you aren't, going across the country from St Michael's Mount in Cornwall all the way to the Norfolk coast, there's this alignment of magnificent hilltops and certainly in the lower end, the West Country end, many dedications to the Archangel Michael. So it got nicknamed the Michael line. However, those churches are 11th century, 12th century, and there's places on this line that are much older. You're talking about the stone circle called the Hurlers on Bodmin Moor, and most importantly, Avebury itself is on this line, and Glastonbury Tor is on this line. So Glastonbury has this unique position, literally almost sharing with Avebury. Avebury and Glastonbury hold the central area of this line. Now, so the Glastonbury Dragons aren't even a year old yet. They're a year old on the 1st of May. And we've already done 3 major events. We did Beltane last year, we did Samhain last year, and we also did the Carnival last year. And each time we've got better at what we do, and it takes a lot of work to do what we do. And now this is the first time we've put on a Dragon Conference as well. We chose to do the May Bank Holiday Sunday every year. This has led to some confusion because people think Beltane is the 1st of May. And there's different ways of looking at Beltane. But the reason we chose to stick with the Bank Holiday Sunday is simply so people can come to town and visit. Next year on the 1st of May, it's a Tuesday, it's not even a bank holiday. And with the Bank Holiday Sunday, for the past 35 years, Glastonbury's had a road run, which means road closure. So by sticking to the Bank Holiday Sunday, we can work with the road closure and make it an all-day event. So that was our original scheme. And then we thought, well, if you're doing it on the Sunday every year, what are you going to do on a Saturday? So